Can I move on to events in Southport? Not just, of course, the dreadful killing of those 3 little girls and other people still in hospital being treated for very serious injuries, including children and their teachers and some people who went to try and rescue them and help them. The events of last night, and we almost saw them coming, didn't we? Because there was clear agitation for trouble. I mean, even when Keir Starmer arrived yesterday to lay the wreath, there were individuals claiming to be closely connected to that story. Who knows whether they were or they weren't. But clearly, you know, spoiling for a fight. Well, they got their fight, didn't they? How do you read those events?
I mean, I think first of all, it's disgusting that people decided to break out in violence, and it wasn't people in Southport that did that. The people in Southport, first of all, was trying to hold a vigil, a peaceful vigil last night with the friends, families and the victims of what happened in their forefront of their mind, the collective grief of what the trauma,
just neighbours to support,
of what they've been through. They weren't thinking about violence. And then for today, see the community coming together to rebuild the wall that had been smashed up, to help clean up what had happened. 39, I think, was the latest figure, police officers who were injured, the same police officers that were there supporting after the horrific attack that happened on that nursery. So I think it's disgusting that people were whipping that level of violence up. And the real concern for me with this, and it's happening time and time again now as well, is that before the facts are known, even before the family and the victims know the facts, people are jumping to conclusions. Now, can you imagine if you're in those circles? You want the answers. You want to know, why is this happening?
But also imagine your horror, your most desperate moment of your life being piggybacked by people in order to cause trouble. Now, I think it's pretty clear that one of the people doing the piggybacking was Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage put out a statement online yesterday, and as ever, when he does this, he skirts around the hard language, but he speaks in a code that his supporters understand, that anyone with ears and a brain understands. And the code is, I'm making this about me, I'm making this about immigration, I'm making this about fight for your country, all of that kind of language, that nationalistic and worse language. He's a race baiter, isn't he?
I just think I've had my issues with Nigel Farage. In previous elections, you can find footage of me taking Nigel Farage on about that poster that he did that time, you know, trying to stir up...
With the row of people behind him.
With the row of people trying to stir up problems and troubles.
And he's an MP now.
And that is the point, really. As a member of Parliament, he must understand that you have a level of responsibility. You're a community leader. You're elected to represent your constituency, and therefore you have a level of responsibility with that. And it's not to stoke up what conspiracy theories or what you think might have happened, or lean it into what you think. Actually, there's a responsibility to say the police are doing a difficult job. Local authorities, all of the services that are on the ground, we want to establish facts as soon as possible, and we have a responsibility to hold the community together and say, let's get the facts, and then let's look at what the actual solutions are and what we can do about the horrific situation that we find ourselves in, not to stir up these, fake news online. And I think that that's really painful for people who are in those circumstances as well, that are caught up in a trauma that instantly happened. They suddenly, their whole world has changed. They need the support of the family liaison officers. They need the police to be talking to them first. And they need the support of those agencies. That what they don't need to do is see online that what's happened to them is somehow being debated about what could have been or couldn't have been.
Is it time to look at the legitimacy of the English Defence League? The police said before these events, and they've said earlier this week, one a senior police officer, not on Merseyside, but very senior police officer in the country, and a senior intelligence officer, saying that that kind of online practice is stoking not just far-right violence, but people with an appetite for violence just generally, and that it is worse than it has ever been. Social media is a rocket fuel, isn't it, to these things? Is it time to look, with a calm head and a clear head at the EDL? Because it's one thing, isn't it, to say, I'm a member of the EDL, I don't like foreign people being in this country in the numbers that they're in. I don't like foreign people, full stop. You can say that. We're a free country, you can say that. But if you then openly, and I think there's evidence that in the lead up to these events in Southport, there's evidence that not only did an MP called Nigel Farage do it, but other people did it online very openly as well. And they openly incited racial violence. Now, if that was an Islamist group that hadn't yet been banned, doing that and causing harm and causing injury and injuring upwards of 30, 40 officers, we'd be looking at banning them, wouldn't we?
Well, we would look at the various different groups, but I think the principle has to be, we don't have thuggish behaviour in the UK. We have the rule of law. Now, protest is important, and I absolutely believe in the right to people to protest.
However horrible someone's opinion might be.
Absolutely. Like I say, I've debated Nigel in the past. But the inciting of violence and violence on the street has absolutely no place in our democracy. And we have to crack down on those that perpetuate violence and spread it within our communities. First of all, we've got to take them on, which, you know, we've got to say, actually, those views, we know where you're going with this. This isn't about...
Take them on politically, conversationally.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, yes, people have different opinions. Yes, people think that you know, the small boat situation is absolutely abhorrent and needs to be done, something needs to be done about that. And the problems with our public services, we've got to have that argument. We've got to say, well, actually, like I'm saying on housing, we haven't built enough houses, end of. And if you're saying we've got too many people in this country working in our service sector and in our public services, well, we've got to train people up, because if we pulled the foreign people that work in our country out of our public services now, our NHS would collapse. So that's why we've said we've got to have a skills agenda, which Bridget has. So you've got to fix these problems. It's an absolute failure of politics to turn around and say it's because these people here or whatever. We've got rules of law in this country that people should follow regardless of who they are. No one's above the law. And we've got to fix the fundamental issues that our country faces around low productivity. So therefore, we've not grown the economy. We've not been investing in our public services. We've had austerity since 2010, and we've not built the homes that we need in the UK. That is not an issue to do with people coming to this country. That is an issue and a failure of us as politicians to put the right policies in place to fix those problems.
But where there is clear success, sadly, at stoking violence on our streets, which we've seen in Southport in the last 24, 36 hours, where there is clear success involving, as I said, an MP, Nigel Farage, involving the English Defence League and others, I'm sure, we surely have to look at organisations like the EDL and examine whether they are, in fact, more than just people carrying out thuggery and violence on the street, which existing laws can deal with, of course, and should deal with, whether it's something more than that. Because you're right to say that the families would have been horrified and aggrieved even further by seeing this, their loss and their trauma used. But I think any right-thinking person looking at what happened in Southport last night is horrified and a bit afraid, actually.
Absolutely.
I was afraid watching it. I was thinking, what is this?
Yeah.
You know, and the thing is, we know what it is. It's race baiting led by a new MP and an organisation called the EDL. We know that it is. The police know that it is. And there may be others on the fringes of it.
We have laws and we have prescribed groups, and we do look at that. And
I'm wondering whether it's time for them to be considered to be in
and it is reviewed regularly. So I'm sure that will be something that the Home Secretary will, you know, be looking at as part of the normal course of what we do and the intelligence that we have. But I think the bigger issue is about taking on the minority of people that have got thuggish behaviour, that actually that's not our British values. It's not the people of Southport that we've seen doing the work today. It's not what people want in their hour of grief. People are upset, they're traumatised, they want the facts, and they want to know what we're doing to do everything we can to prevent a horrific situation like that ever happening again, reviewing to see if there's something more that we could do, and also making sure that we're doing everything in our powers to stop this kind of violence on the streets wherever it comes from, because that there's laws against that. That is not a protest. Lobbing bricks at police, setting fire to police vans is not a protest. That are thugs, and they should be dealt with the full weight of the law.